Oh, I have summoned the mighty hammer, Mjolnir! Greetings, everyone. How you doing? Teching and Barry back again. According to the last chapter of One Piece, it looks like we finally got ourselves a war god in this story. And it's about damn time, too. I swear, I've been waiting for this guy to show up forever. We finally got the war deity. I mean, we could infer their existence because it was mentioned multiple times that, like, yes, the legendary devil fruit of Elbaf could transform you into a great being, the strongest in the world. We could assume that a long time ago there was a big-ass, burly giant that consumed that devil fruit and, like, ruled the world or something, right? And in the last chapter, we got confirmation of that from Jarl. We didn't even see him in silhouette. You know, that's how you know that One Piece is maybe ending soon, within the next 30 years or some such, when Oda is no longer revealing characters in silhouettes. That actually kind of threw me for a loop just for that, you know, alone. Now, to be fair, we still do not know if the way that Jarl was imagining this war god is actually how this character looked, because Jarl was not there. Jarl is talking about a very ancient legend that has been around for a long time. I brought up the Void Century as a possibility, but I am pretty damn sure it's even further back than that. Probably the first age of the Harley, even if we can go back even further than the first age of the Harley. We don't know how long the first age lasts, by the way. If the first age is like literally from the creation of Blue Planet all the way up to like maybe 3,000 years ago, and then the second age, and then the Void Century occurs, and now we're currently in the third age. So the first age might be like all the way back to like the equivalent of like the Hadean in our world, like the formation of the planet. Everything happened. The war god apparently faced off against the sun god, and then crazy stuff happened, and then that age ended, and then the second age started, and we go from there, right? So Jarl is talking about it, is like explaining this to Gabon and Shanks in the flashback. Like, Loki has the power of the Ryu no Mi model Needhog, all right, or Thunder Dragon, as the kanji is used in Japanese. A massive dragon that is said when it is consumed, that when the fruit is consumed by an ancient giant, the true powers are awakened. Because whenever you eat this devil fruit, you become a massive dragon. Out of all of the dragon devil fruits we've seen, which I want to clarify, when it comes to actual dragons, we've only really gotten two of them. Kaido's devil fruit was technically a fish fruit, and Drake and the other Tobi Roppo were the Ryu no Mi, sure, but those were dinosaurs, those weren't dragons. The only two devil fruits I think that could properly be say as dragons are Killingham's, because it's the Ryu no Mi model Kirin, which becomes like a mythical dragon, and then we have Loki's Ryu no Mi model Needhog. I guess, yes, you can include Kaido's, because technically it's the model as your dragon, but this is the biggest out of all of them, right? And we see a nice little, comparison. If a human were to eat the dragon fruit, you become a big dragon, probably the size of like dragon number 13 from Punk Hazard. If a giant were to eat the devil fruit, they would become an even bigger dragon, and an ancient giant would become the biggest dragon. Now, here's the better question. What would happen if Zunisha ate the Needhog devil fruit? Then we have basically a dragon the size of the moon or the planet, I would say at that point. What happens if Sarume the Kraken consumes the Needhog devil fruit? What happens then, huh? Yeah. What about those giant things marching around the Florian Triangle? We have no idea what those things are, but what if they ate the Needhog devil fruit? I don't know. Maybe. I also got some messages, some comments, people asking, what would happen if a Tontada ate the dragon? And I would imagine, like, that you would still become, like, larger than a human. I would assume if, like, one of the Tontadas ate the Needhog dragon, you'd probably become the size of, like, a 3-story building, which is pretty impressive for a Tontada. But, like, not, maybe even smaller. Maybe it's the size of, like, a shed or something like that, like a small little building. You become exactly the size of a Ford F-350 if you consume the Needhog devil fruit as a Tontada. But that's the basic gist of how this works, okay? And it goes back to what Rock said about, like, oh, yeah, I need 2 devil fruits to take over the world. One of them is the dragon fruit that's at Elbaf, but it's only awakened its true power if Harald eats it. Also, Loki eating it receives the power as well. And we saw the devastation that that thing can bring in the last chapter, right? We saw the giant thunder breath cannon that Loki spewed, just casually just stomped on Summers and just like electrocuted him into oblivion. He'll probably be back, but don't worry, Loki could just step on him again, so we'll be fine with that, okay? So, back in the day, I'm going to say the first age of the Harley, this war deity had the power of this dragon fruit. Not only did he have that, but he had Ragnir the hammer, which just means iron thunder. And then the squirrel, the ice squirrel, Ratatoskr, was his faithful companion, right? And they fought the sun god. The sun god during that era of the first age seems to be a little bit more violent than like Luffy's depiction of the sun god, right? The sun god goes from being of destruction to being of hope and liberation for the slaves to like a trickster god, right? Okay. Luffy's definitely more of like trickster laughing kind of stuff, but he also exudes hope, but he also can definitely bring a lot of destruction. So I don't know if it's just like each depiction of the sun god is actually correct, like they were all like that all the time. It's just like, for example, like Luffy shows up to your island and, you know, he defeats the main enemy, but in the process destroys the island. It makes sense that like 100 years from then, people could look at Luffy like, oh my god, he's a destroyer deity that blew apart our island, right? Or you could have other people that be like, no, he saved us from all of the evil pirates on the island, right? So you can see how rumors and myth and folklore can bend and twist and arrive at these different conclusions, right? So we have no idea why they fought, but they did fight back in the day, and we know that during the Void Century, when Joy Boy had Luffy's Devil Fruit ability, the giants were allied with him, at least we could assume, as same thing with the Kozuki clan and Zunisha and Emeth. Emeth also, by the way, is a robot that has a head that is shaped kind of like an ancient giant as well. Let's see. Actually, now that I think about it, what other island out there in the story includes a giant skull? Island, giant skull. I got it. Hachinosu. It makes perfect sense. Rox was based there, then Wang took it over for nearly 40 years, and then Blackbeard finally ousted him. And Avalopazaro consumed the island fruit. So we all know what's going with here, right? Obviously. Oda could not make it more clear. Avalopazaro will become the next war god. Solved it. Okay. No. It's Onigashima, right? Like, a lot of people have brought up Onigashima. I saw a video Morge made about it the other day, so go check out his video on it. But, like, yeah, it's a giant skull. Not just a giant skull, an ancient giant skull. Not even just an ancient giant skull. Onigashima is the size of a mountain. Like, they built an entire festival stage inside of it. The whole final battle between Luffy and Kaido took place on top of this damn thing, right? So, we have regular giants that are like maybe 20 meters tall. Then we have the ancient giants like Oars and Little Oars Jr. that are maybe like 60 to 70 meters tall. And then we have whatever the hell was the creature that left behind the skull at Onigashima, which would have been the size of, like, the Florian Triangle monsters, if not bigger. I mean, just the head of this thing was massive. Now, something that I do want to remind everybody is that this is what Wano originally looked like. All right, this was old Wano back during the Void Century, right, before the walls were put up, okay? So you have the towns and the cities on the, the sea level, and then you have the massive Mount Fuji, which looms over the entire island, right? And the shape of Mount Fuji, you can see it kind of loops down, and then that's where Onigashima ended up being. And so then when the island, something happened during the Void Century where these giant earthen walls were erected. We still don't really know exactly how that happened. Maybe it involved Zunisha, because Zunisha has the ability to be an elephant. I don't know if you noticed, Zunisha has all of the elephant abilities. So Zunisha could like put its trunk inside of this giant bowl of fresh water. It is fresh water because it's like rain and stuff. And then just like suck all of the water out and then spew it out and then drain the entire country of Wano. So that's something that's happening there. But the people of Wano had to migrate to the top of Mount Fuji. So the Wano that we see during that entire arc is just like an area on the side of the mountain, including Onigashima, right? So it it begs a question, at least to me, right? If this is how Wano originally looked, then the skull of that giant is on that little, like, peak of Mount Fuji. Does that mean, like the rest of the giant is, like, the skeleton is, like, literally encased within the mountain? Probably not, because Kaido and Big Mom were both blasted under Wano, and it is a volcano. Like, Mount Fuji isn't just, like, you know, for show or just like a tomb for this war deity. There is lava, or I guess it would be magma when it's currently inside of the volcano. It is like a caldera. There's magma underneath it, right? So probably not going to be like a giant molten magma ancient giant skeleton with inside of Mount Fuji. But holy shit, that would be cool if that really happens. So, you know, maybe put that on the back burner. Maybe that could actually happen at some point. Now, when it comes to the name of this deity, in the review, I was like, oh, this is the war god Elbaf. Now, back during Little Garden, in the manga, it was mentioned that they worshipped a war deity. Like, Dory and Bragi, I think mostly Dory, were telling Luffy and Vivi about, like, oh, why we're doing this, and, you know, the culture of Elbaf, you know, we're a warfaring nation, and we worship a war deity, right? I think in the English dub and then some other translations, Dory directly says that the name of the war deity alongside the name of the island is both Elbaf. That's okay if that's actually the case. I just don't know if that's a translation thing or not. Because in the manga that I was looking at, it was more of just like, oh, there's a god that we worship. That's it. But if you just want to say that's the name of the war god is Elbaf, that works too. I mean, like, yeah. So that's what I mean. If, like, we're going all the way back to the first age, Loki mentioned that the primordial world of Elbaf is the first land to ever exist. He might have been very literal with that, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. Although it was mentioned also during Little Garden, I should bring this up, the age of the dinosaurs was mentioned by, I think, Vivi, and this was mentioned to be, like, millions, hundreds of millions of years ago. So there is, like, a Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, like, equivalent era in the One Piece world that did exist, like, well over, you know, 100 million years ago, something like that. Well, at least the Triassic would be over 100 million years ago, right? The Cretaceous would have ended 66 million years ago, when I think there was, like, what killed the dinosaurs again? I don't remember. I think it was like a rock, like a giant rock from space. Yeah, but it could have been aliens with a laser beam. Never discount aliens with a laser beam, right? The dinosaurs might have been on to too much. They might have been able to start developing their own space travel technology, and then the aliens were like, whoa, hold on. We can't have T-Rexes flying around in space. We need to end this, right? Okay. So we don't exactly know when, like, the world was formed or when Elbaf was formed, but the idea that there was a war deity way back in the day that could turn into a massive dragon that can blot out the entire sun, and then that war deity did die. So the war deity wasn't probably like an actual god. It's still out for debate whether or not we're going to get a straight up, like, deity in the One Piece world. Like, aside from Usopp, we all know. The only closest character that comes close to that is, like, Buggy, right? Buggy and then Usopp, obviously. But, like, are we going to get, like, an actual straight up deity? Like the clouds part and then, like, the sun god descends, like, ole! And then it starts throwing spears of, like, flaming hot sun fire everywhere. Like, is that ever gonna happen? Probably not. It seems like this was just a really big, bulky, ancient giant that lived way back in the day that could equally turn into a huge dragon. Now, Ratatoskr, the ice squirrel. That's how Jarl referred to him as, okay? So we know that Ratatoskr is, you know, merged together with Ragnir, the hammer. So the immediate first conclusion is it was a hammer that ate the squirrel Zoan, right? Because that's what we've seen up until now. You have Funkfried, who had his Spandam's sword that consumed the Zozo no Mi. You have Lassu, who was Mr. Four's dog that consumed, it was a cannon that consumed the animal fruit. So it's usually an object that eats a Zoan using that special method, and they become merged, okay? That doesn't seem to be the situation here. for one thing, it was mentioned that Vegapunk recently developed that technology, but then again, the further back we go in the One Piece timeline, the more technologically advanced things become. So if you want to say back during the Void Century, they knew more about devil fruits and combining them with objects, that would also make sense, right? But that doesn't seem to be the case here, because the hammer and the squirrel both existed at the same time. Squirrel seemed to just be a mythical squirrel that had the ability to manipulate ice and snow. And we see this when Loki transforms into his Needhog form and emerges up from the primordial realm. It begins to snow out of nowhere, and even Summers mentions, like, snow now? It doesn't even make sense. And then thunder and lightning begin to boom out everywhere. So the thunder and the lightning coming from Loki's power, and then the ice and the snow coming from Ratatoskr's power, merging together, makes sense. And so Jarl goes on to say that after the death of this war god, without its master, Ratatoskr chose to inhabit the weapon. So Ratatoskr, by the way, is probably several thousand years old, so just prepare yourselves for that. I mean, we already know Zunisha is around 1,000 years old. Emmett is also pretty damn old. But yeah, we also have a squirrel. So the only people that know about stuff that happened like over 1,000 years ago or during the Void Century are just like an elephant and a squirrel. So maybe Chopper can have a conversation with Ratatoskr after this. Maybe Chopper could sit down and be like, "Hi, you're a giant squirrel." And the squirrel's like, Yes, I am, little reindeer Tanuki. I am Ratatoskr. It's like, great. Can you tell us everything? Dude, if we learn the Void Century backstory from a damn squirrel, this might just be the best damn manga of all time. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, that is totally an Oda's, like, playbook for him to do that type of shit, right? We have this lost moment of history, and it's like, oh man, how are we going to learn about it? Well, Robin is going to find the Rio poneglyphs, and Robin's probably going to be the one to decipher all of these poneglyphs and read the true history to us. No, turns out this squirrel just knows about it. Maybe it'll be a scene like with Rayleigh, when Rayleigh knew about the Void Century, and Robin asked him about it, and Rayleigh was like, yeah, sure, I know about it. I could tell you if you want. And Robin was just kind of like, no, I think I'm going to learn it on my own. What if it's something similar? What if, like, Chopper's having a conversation with Ratatoskr after the end of the arc, or Loki? Loki seems to be able to understand him too, although I'm not really sure if he's like they can have a conversation fully, or if it's just they understand each other's vibes like Ash and Pikachu kind of do. Maybe it's one or more of the latter. But anyway, what if like Robin is standing over there like, this squirrel is well over 1,000 years old and apparently fought aside this war deity to fight the sun god. I wonder if this squirrel knows anything about the Void Century, but then maybe Robin would be like, no, I'm not learning about the Void Century from a damn squirrel, all right? This is just, maybe Robin was just like, no, I'm going to do what Rayleigh told me to. I'm going to continue my journey, and I'm going to find the damn poneglyphs. That would suck if it's just like, man, I was so close to finding the last few poneglyphs, and then this squirrel shows up and just like, I can tell you everything you need to know. Who knows? But then again, probably not, maybe not. Because if Ratatoskr, if this event occurred like 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, like during the First Age, right? The war god dies. Did the sun god kill the war god? That's another thing, right? But then again, you'd think if that was the case, Ratatoskr would not be a fan of Luffy. Luffy going into the sun god form, you think Ratatoskr would be constantly like, you killed my friend, you know? But that wasn't the case. We even see Ratatoskr and Luffy in his Gear 5th form dancing on top of the dragon at the end of chapter 1174. Ratatoskr's just so happy to, finally be reunited with the war deity, or the dragon form, like his master has returned essentially, right? Doesn't seem to be there was an issue there. So I don't think the sun god, like they battled, they fought. They could have just been rivals like Shanks and Mihawk, right? But just like Shanks and Mihawk, their fights were always off screen, which was unfortunate, right? So anyway, if this happened several thousand years ago, right, and Ratatoskr decided, like, okay, my master is dead, so I'm going to just use maybe Ratatoskr is just a mythical, yokai, something equivalent. I don't know what it is, but like maybe Ratatoskr had a separate devil fruit ability that was unrelated to the fact that it was an ice squirrel. It was just a normal ice squirrel that had a devil fruit ability that allowed him to assimilate with objects. which would also imply that devil fruits existed before the Void Century, which I always kind of felt like they did anyway, so, that's fine. But then Ratatoskr decides to merge with the hammer, Ragnir. They become one. So back then, Ragnir the hammer was probably not sentient. It was probably just a really badass hammer. So Ratatoskr merges with the hammer and then chooses to remain in the vault in the West Castle at Elbaf. And might have been there for well over 1,000 years, because Elbaf is a very old nation, all right? Elbaf's history did not begin during the Void Century, right? So Ratatoskr could have been in that vault for like 3,000 years, as long as we know, also making the squirrel effectively immortal? There's a lot of questions. You know what? Despite all the crazy shit happening right now, with Loki becoming a huge thunder dragon, and we have the Gale-La giants, and this whole flashback involving rocks, and all the stuff with Emu being there now, and then Brooke's backstory we're touching upon, and all that shit, it says something about the story where I'm just, like, more interested in this squirrel right now. Like what is with this squirrel? I want to know. So, yeah, I think Oda might change around. I think because this is ultimately a legend that Jarl heard a long time ago. He wasn't there for this, and he was just like, yeah, this is what they say. Who's they? I'm like, oh, like, the old elders of Elbaf that told me, and then, they told them, and then it just keeps going all the way back, thousands of years, and it's like to the point where when we finally do learn about this, and we probably will, because we're going to get a Void Century flashback, but, oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, let me ask you a question. Because we now know there was a lot of stuff that happened before the Void Century, right? There was the whole First and Second Age. The Void Century happened like at a transitionary period between the Second and Third Age, from what we understand. So, which flashback do you want to learn about first? Do you want to learn about the Void Century flashback first, or do you want to learn about the First Age? I think it would make more sense to actually go further back first and learn about the First Age, and then the Second Age, and then leave the Void Century for last. So we understand where the world is right now. Then we go back to like 5,000 years ago, maybe even 10,000. Then we go back like tens of thousands of years maybe to see what things were like then. And then the Void Century was sandwiched right in between. That would actually be crazy. If it's like, oh yeah, First Age happens, War God fights with the Sun God, things are blowing up, massive explosions are everywhere, oh my god, it's just death and detritus as far as the eye could see. Then the Second Age kicks up, and everything seems to be going good for a while. Like, the Second Age is like, oh wow, this is such a perfect... The Second Age might have been a straight-up utopia. It could have been. And then we went from absolute death and destruction to utopia to where we're at right now with the world government and the Marines and all the pirates and the Yonko and everything and the world flooding. And it's like, then that would raise the biggest questions of what the hell happened during the Void Century to go from utopia to this. And then we could have like this whole thing where it's like, where's the world going to go from here? Are we going to go slip back into the fiery destruction of the First Age? Or are we going to go back to the utopian society of the Second Age? Or are we going to forge a new path? So that's not a bad idea. I kind of like that, and I'll leave you with that. So, yeah, probably going to learn more about, I think, the First Age before we learn about the Void Century, because, like, Ratatoskr would have been around and would have seen some stuff then. So we can learn that from the perspective of a squirrel. Fantastic. Okay. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Teching, signing out. Later, all.